Showing you here a video. The title is "What's Crystal Methamphetamine Like? Why is it one of the world's most addictive drugs?" It's got 4,221,000 and change views. So I just want to show you a quick clip from this.
What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to discuss a question that I'm pretty commonly asked because I am a former meth addict with 3.5 years of sobriety, and the question is very simple. What is meth like? I think part of the reason I'm asked this question so frequently is simply because of the morbid stories we hear. We hear it referred to as the devil's drug. There's been interviews where people say it'll take a good man, like the kindest man in the world, and literally turn him completely the opposite, like instinct-driven monster, essentially. You hear horror stories about meth psychosis. You see also that show Breaking Bad. That caused some people. I remember I was watching Breaking Bad with a friend of mine, and she asked me if I ever done meth, and I was like, that was my drug of choice. And then she asked me, well, what was it like? And you know, it does such horrible things to people, yet people will try it and they'll continue to use it. I'm going to talk about the highs and the lows. I'm not going to overly glamorize it, but it is a great high, but it also has really terrible lows. To be honest, to really sum it up, I wouldn't wish meth upon my worst enemy, and I'm a person who experimented with every drug out there, from crack to heroin to meth. Any addictive narcotic I've done, and I would say meth is by far the worst drug I ever done, and the only drug that I regret ever trying to my core completely, fully. I wish I never fucking knew it existed. I wish it never existed on this planet. Meth is a horrible fucking drug, okay? You know,
Okay, well, you're probably going to agree with what he's saying, and you're probably going to be shocked by a lot of what I have to say myself and present information, but we'll see, you know, how it goes. First of all, before anything, I want to applaud the kid. I don't know, I call him a kid because I'm almost 44 years old. But, you know, he's been through a typical experience of what a drug addict would experience. And I have experienced probably 10 times or 100 times worse what he's experienced in his life. And I can add credibility to that. And I can also add a lot of information that's factual. You know, I appreciate his opinions and his points of view, but they are not actually the majority. And you're probably thinking I'm crazy, but let's see what happens. I'm going to show you another video clip. This is of Dr. Carhart. They'll introduce him now, and this video is brought to you by Democracy Now! This is obviously not my content.
On the nationwide shift towards liberalizing drug laws. We're joined now by the groundbreaking neuropsychopharmacologist, Dr. Carhart. He's the first tenured African-American scientist at Columbia University, where he is an associate professor in the psychology and psychiatry departments. He's also a member of the National Advisory Council on Drug Abuse and a research scientist in the Division of Substance Abuse at the New York State Psychiatric Institute. However, long before he entered the hallowed halls of the Ivy League, Carhart gained first-hand knowledge about drug usage while growing up in one of Miami's toughest neighborhoods. He recently published his memoir called High Price, a neuroscientist's journey of self-discovery that challenges everything you know about drugs and society. In the book, he recalls his journey of self-discovery, how he escaped a life of crime and drugs and avoided becoming one of the crack addicts he now studies. Dr. Carhart, we welcome you to Democracy Now! The title of your book almost was the song we were just playing, Trouble Man?
That was my vote, Trouble Man, but the publishers thought that it wasn't 1973, so we should go with something more modern.
Both your research findings will surprise many, and also your own path in life. Let's start by talking about, well, where you come from.
Well, I come from, as you said, I grew up in the hood, and so when we think about these communities that we care about, the communities that have been so-called devastated by drugs of abuse, I believed that narrative for a long time.
Okay, now, this is, again, Carhart. He's a psychoneuropharmacologist or neuroscientist at Columbia University, an Ivy League school. You know, I want you to also look at another thing here that I found interesting, and I'm just waiting for this to go down, but okay, number of views. Remember the other kid there from wherever he was from? You know, I like I said, I give him a lot of credit, but he had over 4 million views, like 4.5 million views. I'm not sure exactly what we said, but this is 108,000, and I believe his video is from like a year and a half, 2 years ago, which is incredible. You know, again, I give him a lot of credit. That's an incredible job, especially on YouTube. But this video is from 2014 it was published. So it's just interesting what people are watching and where they're getting information, you know, online and on YouTube. Also, I wanted to point out the title of this video is Drugs Aren't the Problem. Neuroscientist Carhart on brain science and myths about addiction. Before we get far into that, I wanted to show you a molecule structure here, and this is meth versus Adderall. Everybody probably knows what Adderall is. It's dextroamphetamine, or a mixture of dextro and levoamphetamines, which is methamphetamine is dextro, not amphetamine. The chemical group is almost identical. The only difference is this group. I'm sorry, it's a methyl group. These two structures show the difference between them. Okay, there's not much difference. I'd also like to show you something here that's also interesting as psychiatric drugs, number of people taking Adderall in the United States. This is just for Adderall, and it breaks down every age group. 0 to 5 years old, there's 62,000. Okay, something that's that close to methamphetamine, doctors are giving to 62,843 0 to 5 year olds. 0 to 1 year olds, even babies, there's 400 babies. Now the numbers increase exponentially. Here at 6 to 12 years old, 700,000 almost. 700,000 6 to 12 year olds. 13 to 17 year olds, another 500,000, a little over. Now you get into 18 to 24, almost 1 million. 25 to 44, which is where I fall, is almost 2 million. 45 to 64 year olds, almost 800,000. 65 and over, seniors, 72,000. 4.8 million people in the United States alone, this is in the United States, are prescribed something that is one methyl structure away from the structure of methamphetamine. Again, I want to say, like, all the videos that I came across on YouTube on methamphetamine were just a lot of former addicts, you know, explaining their experience, but typically that's, you know, 20% of the population. And Dr. Carhart says this over and over again. I don't know if we'll get his exact quote on that here. The fact that I like to use, you know, other people's information and just not my own, and kind of comment on things as we go, I think shows that I'm trying to be transparent, and I'm going to be transparent with myself as well, and my own credentials, I guess I could say, in this subject as we go along here. I don't know if I'll get into them completely in this video. There's not time for everything. I'm going to be making a series on drugs, a long series, because it's an important subject that needs to be talked about in the reality of what it is, and, you know, in a factual, scientific way. I know there's experience from people and life experience, and I have an incredible amount of that I'll share with you in the future, and I hope you keep watching my channel here as I develop it. So let's go to Mr. Hart here for just a little bit longer and see what else he has to say.
of abuse. I believed that narrative for a long time. In fact, I've been studying drugs for about 23 years. For about 20 of those years, I believed that drugs were the problems in the community. But when I started to look more carefully, started looking at the evidence more carefully, it became clear to me that drugs weren't the problem. The problem was poverty, drug policy, lack of jobs, a wide range of things, and drugs were just one sort of component that didn't contribute as much as we had said they had.
So talk about the findings of these studies. I mean, you've been publishing in the most elite scientific journals now for many years.
Yeah, so one of the things that shocked me when I first started to understand what was going on, when I discovered that 80 to 90% of the people who actually use drugs like crack cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, 80 to 90% of those people were not addicted. I thought, wait a second, I thought that once you use these drugs, everyone becomes addicted, and that's why we had these problems. That was one thing that I found out. Another thing that I found out is that if you provide alternatives to people, jobs, other sort of alternatives, they don't overindulge in drugs like this. I discovered this in the human laboratory as well as the animal laboratory. The same thing plays out in the animal literature.
What do you mean you're saying that crack is not as addictive as everyone says?
Well, when we think of crack, well, we have a beautiful example now that as the past year, the mayor of Toronto, Rob Ford, for example, the guy used crack cocaine and he did his job, despite what you think of him and his politics, but he came to work every day, he did his job. The same is true even of Marion Barry. He came to work every day, did his job. In fact, he did his job so well, so the people of D.C. thought that they voted for him even after he was convicted for...
There's a perfect example, you know, and again, he did say what I've been claiming here is the 80% thing. I'm glad that he said this in this clip because I've watched probably a dozen of his videos that he's in, and I think he's an instrumental influencer on the war against the war on drugs. So I really applaud this guy, and he's a source of valuable information. He's a consultant to the government, as well as, obviously published dozens of papers in medical journals and things like that. I mean, he's a professor at Columbia University in neuroscience, so that's the exact study of what goes on. He studied these drugs in depth, and I highly, highly recommend you watch his videos. Again, my points of sobriety. I've been to 13 rehabs. I've been in and out of AA and NA since I was 19 years old, and I'm 43. I have been to federal prison for 4 years for drug trafficking, and I have a wealth of knowledge. Also real life knowledge combined with I have been, a layman researcher for probably 20 years, if not 25 years. If not, actually, before I started using drugs, because that's what got me interested in them, is I read books on them before I ever even tried any of them. Now, I'm not suggesting that people go out and do drugs. That's not it. I'm not pro-drugs, but I am here to give you the facts on them because the truth has been exaggerated exponentially. I actually was in that 20%. I was an addict for many years, and I was addicted to alcohol and crack cocaine. Those are the drugs that caused my demise and me resulting in ending up in federal prison. I'll get more into all of that. There's so much for me to tell. I was actually, obviously people in federal prison, they're the highest level dealers. They're the people that traffic drugs into the country, around the world. There's people from all over the world. There's a lot of, very successful white-collar guys there that had businesses at one point, and politicians, and, all kinds of stories, all kinds of people that I had the opportunity to talk to in there. And just basically, it's not what you think it is. It's not a place you want to go. But there's a wealth of, experience and knowledge in there that I accessed versus just, screwing off and getting into trouble and doing things that I'm not supposed to be doing. It's basically something that you make your own way in there. You can create a reality for yourself inside or outside of prison. It's something that I have adopted, and something that I have found through self-discovery that, in spirituality, I've always had a spiritual side to myself that's been very strong, despite what people think about drug addicts. And I've always, tried to use scientific information, and that's not going to protect you against addiction. If you're prone to something, and if your life and mental health are in alignment with, developing these addictions, as Mr. Hart said, it's not the drugs. It's something else that's going on that causes you to do that. Drugs are just a symptom of a deeper problem that people have that they're trying to cope with, and it's very complex. It's a mental health issue, and the drugs have very little to do with it. People, in fact, have the same mental health problems that as addicts do, and they just use a different form of pleasure or escape, to cope with that. And drugs can be used for that, which is wrong. That leads to addiction. And drugs can be used for a useful purpose. And there are many useful purposes out there for them. And people can elevate themselves to being, I guess, an addict to somebody who just uses them and stays away from the ones that they're probably predisposed to or becoming problematic. Which is what I've done. And I don't use them every day. I use them a few times a month, if that. They're very expensive, and I don't have a lot of money, so I don't use them very often, and I don't have a desire to, because I have pursued different things that cause excitement in my life, and interest, and passion, and desire for me to do something different. I've always been a very intelligent person, so I've been told, and I've always been very creative, and there's other things that you can do in life. And I got excited about other things, and that's what Dr. Hart was talking about. If you provide people with other options in life, then they will pursue those other options a lot of the time. And 80% of the people, again, don't go down this road at all. They go and they do their jobs. Like the mayor there of Washington, D.C., that got reelected even after being a public, crack user. He was a user of it, not an addict. There's a difference. The worst part about them is they're so expensive. And that's what causes a lot of the other problems that addicts end up getting into. They end up stealing. They end up prostituting themselves. And that causes a lot of the moral issues within themselves. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'll make more videos about exactly how that snowballs into the disease of addiction, which starts off as one mental health problem and just gets worse and worse through the trauma and through the moral violation of their own morals. Just going to document, I don't want to call it credibility, but I guess it is on this subject. Syracuse man in prison for bringing bath salts to central New York. So this is a man federal agent says was responsible for introducing the synthetic drugs known as bath salts to the Syracuse area 4 years ago was sentenced today to nearly 4 years in prison. And right there, that would be me. Back when I was 37. So Szynski, 37, was the one who got the ball rolling in synthetic drugs in central New York. Sotheby told him before sentencing. Now, I'm not proud of this, but again, I was selling synthetic drugs. I will tell you the story because it's a story that even people in federal prison said, you should write a book or make a movie. You can make a movie out of your life, and just out of this one part of my life. I mean, I didn't realize my life was that interesting until people kept telling me, why don't you write a book? Why don't you make a movie? My whole life they've been telling me that about all the different things that I've experienced and went through, and I just don't look at them as that interesting or a big deal. When I look back, yeah, I look at it as crazy. But a lot of people find that interesting because they didn't do those things in life, and they want to see what it was all about and see what that person is actually like. And I think you'll be surprised to find out what kind of person I actually am. For instance, one of the first things I do every morning is I read this Bible app. I'm definitely heavily into spirituality. I'm Christian. I'm, open-minded to everybody having a spiritual belief, but I happen to be Christian. And, I love consciousness, and, I want everybody to just be okay and get along, and I've always been like that. It isn't like I went through this sudden change and I was an addict and then I was a bad person and became this better person. I've always been, what people would probably regard to as a nice man, a nice guy. I just happened to get into the wrong things for a while, and I don't even know if they're the wrong things. We're going to look into that, of what wrong means, and I'm not trying to justify what I did again. And this isn't about that. This isn't about me trying to liberate myself from any wrongdoing, because I've already taken, responsibility inside, and I've also did my time for what happened. But I just want to show you that, people aren't always what you think they are, and there's a lot of people hiding. There's a guy that I know, I'm not going to say how I would be connected to him or how I am connected to him, but he was very close to me. He's a teacher, a senior science teacher actually. He was in the U.S. Air Force, had compartmentalized security clearance for years, genius level IQ, and he used all different drugs. Nobody knew about it except me, probably. I was the one that, actually used them with him, and nobody else did, and he had done a lot of it in college and growing up, and it was just a big secret. And there's so many of those people out there. His friend, which is the senior advanced professor for chemistry at a major university, also used drugs, and they were using the drugs, the synthetic ones that I was getting, and they analyzed them and they told me about them, and it's very interesting to see that what happened with all this. And I want to make more videos to explain all this to everybody, and I hope I get a viewer base. And it's not to make money, and it's not to brag, and it's not to do anything other than educate people on the reality and give people truthful information, and stop putting out one-sided information about things, because there's more to it. And again, it's not to promote it, it's just to tell you, people are going to do drugs. People are going to do that in society. We should make it safe. We should make it acceptable. It should not be criminalized. It should be regulated. And there would be a whole different world. And it used to be like that for centuries. There wasn't all this attention. There's always been mind-altering uses. And they're finding LSD, ecstasy, psilocybin, which is, the magic mushrooms they call. All of those drugs right now are being studied. MDMA, which is ecstasy, is going to be approved for PTSD by the end of 2021. I can show you the information on that. There's so many different things happening. LSD therapy as well is a good possibility, or psilocybin. These drugs that we once said are mind damaging and they damage your brain, they actually make new connections in your brain. Ketamine, I told people about this years ago. They call it Special K, or cat tranquilizer, which is not, it's used for, it's a dissociative anesthetic. It's used for anesthesia for animals and people. It's always been approved for that. It's always been, they used it on people in Vietnam in the field, is why it came out. They would give the soldiers, the medics, ketamine to inject the soldiers with and do field surgery. That's why it was developed originally. I guess I have a wealth of information on these subjects, and I have truthful information, not just, this is what happened, and this is really bad, and this is what, I appreciate a lot of that, and I've been through all that. I've been there, like I said, I've been to 13 rehabs. I've been to about 20 outpatients, 7 halfway houses. I've been through the ringer, but I've also came to a point in my life where I said, you know, it's not that important. I like it, it's something I can do, but I have to be selective, and I have to be careful, and I have to, you know, have reverence for these things, because they are powerful substances. But I also take a bunch of pharmaceuticals for mental health issues, and a lot of it. Why do people have a couple of drinks after dinner? Why do you do that? Why do you smoke why do you smoke cigarettes? Why do you enjoy coffee all day? It's the same thing. They're all drugs, and we tend to separate them from other illegal substances, and a lot of those are more dangerous. But alcohol, actually, I'm not going to do it in this video, but as a matter of fact, maybe I will. Right here, for example, and these vary obviously, but this is from Vox. How scientists, this doesn't vary, because this is, there's professionals or experts, whatever they are, but I go with what scientists say, because they're doing actual studies on the body, brain, they're doing studies on behavior. It's a science, and if something's a science, then it's probably most accurate or true. So that's what I go by. And how scientists rank drugs from most to least dangerous, and why the rankings are flawed. So right here, alcohol, heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and what they mean by flawed is the impact of crime and socioeconomic effects, or which there's harm to users and then there's harm to others. Like heroin is more harmful to the users, crack cocaine is more harmful to the user, methamphetamine is more harmful to the user. Alcohol is like the fourth most harmful to the user, but the first most harmful by far to others. So therefore it ranks the most harmful to everybody because of the problems that it causes, because of the violent behavior that people have, and all the other problems, people beating their kids, abusing people. I mean, it's the most destructive and dangerous drug, but yet, why do you use it? Why? Well, because I like to have a few drinks. I don't do that. Well, that's what 80% of the people do, the same as you. The same as with other psychoactive substances. That's the same. So, the 20%, yeah, the people that drink, the 20% do fight and do that. You don't do that, so that's why you can have them, right? Same thing with the other chemicals. They're all chemicals, and I'm going to get into all these videos, and I've ran up to already 30 minutes, and I didn't even get into the initial topic that I was getting into, which is to dissect the methamphetamine drug and tell you what I think of it, and show you scientific information and people that are talking, that are experts in science, and not just people on here that have had a certain experience and want to tell their story. And obviously I want to tell my story, and I have had a certain experience, and it's pretty profound. So I hope you stay with me, and I hope you appreciate all the aspects of information that I'm going to present. And I appreciate you, watching, and I appreciate your support. Primary motivation at all. But again, thank you for watching.